Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Deep Dive with Nick and Dave. Only Nick is not with us here today. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but I want to introduce our guest host, Jarrett Wallace, good friend of mine. He is the pastor over at Union Hill United Methodist, which is just a couple of miles from here. But Jarrett's also a very dear friend who I've known for a number of years now, and so welcome, Jarrett.
Thanks.
Are you ready to do this?
I'm excited, man.
Okay,
I'm excited,
let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, so first of all, let me let you all know where Nick is, if you did not know. Nick's mom has been a recipient for a lung transplant up at Vanderbilt University Hospital up in Nashville. And she was on the list for some time. We were kind of anticipating that this was going to occur at some time, but you don't get a pretty short notice of when that transplant's going to be available. And so that happened just a few days ago, and she went up and had it, and it went real well, and she's recovering real well, I understand. But Nick is up there as part of the caregiving team for her, and so we're praying for them and wish them all well. And so hello, Nick, if you're watching this. But Jarrett Wallace, all right, tell folks about yourself.
Well, you know a lot about me, but they don't. So I am the current pastor at Union Hill United Methodist Church, probably 1.7 miles from here, to be precise. I've been there 2.5 years now, loving it. I am a part-time local pastor, which means in theory, I am bivocational, which means I have another job that I also work from the church at. So, but love it there. As you mentioned, we've known each other for
14, 15, 16 years, something like that.
I think you baptized Christian when he was a baby. You were there when he was born, I believe.
Right. Susan was pregnant when I...
That's right.
So that we can do his age. He's how old?
He's 14.
He'll
be 15 in December.
15 years. Yep. Okay. How about that? Wow.
You were there at the church at the time, and I left for a season to go to seminary and then serve in another church.
Right.
And then as the circumstances had it, we're back
together.
We're back together.
And we've done a few things together as churches, and we should do more. We should do more. We talk about it all the time. But, they are definitely, that's part of the Methodist connectional system.
Absolutely.
And I'm so thankful that you're able to sit in here with us for a couple of weeks. Jarrett's a great guy, and we'll get some great insight. Tell us a little bit more about your family, though, because we know...
married for 20, let me get this right, because I'll get in trouble if I get it wrong, 23 years. No, 22 years.
What year was it?
That's wrong. 21 years.
Okay.
That is bad. I can't, that's math in my head.
Yeah, that is bad.
That is bad.
And we're not going to edit that out either. Susan's going to see that.
Susan's going to watch it and go, well, I won't use the words she's going to use. I have 3 kids. Christian's 14, we talked about. He's in high school at West Forsyth High School. And I have 2 daughters. One is 9, Elizabeth, and Juliet is 6, and they're both at a brand new elementary school in Forsyth County this year. So we're busting at the seams, and everybody's busy every hour of the day, feels like.
Awesome. You have a beautiful family, and
thank you.
And a great wife who will be understanding of you not being able to remember.
You're right. As long as I remember the date.
The correct date.
Just remember the date.
Right. Yeah, get that.
June 30th.
And you got to also have that gift, that anniversary gift. You have to have it the day of. You can't go out and get it that day.
No. I've been chastised 20-some times for that. You're right.
So, well, anyway, so let's dig in a little bit into to the text. Gave you the text, and you were gracious enough to watch the sermon, because that's what we usually do, is a deep dive on the sermon. And you were telling me at lunch that you've actually preached a similar series.
I did. I did preach the same text last year, about this time actually. I think it was the 29th of August.
Right.
So it was called Taming the Tongue. So it's the same verses.
Well, it's an important lesson that we're getting into. We're in this practical lessons from James. And first week we looked at one of the very first verses about counting it all joy when we go through trials. We talked about trials. Then we got a little more personal in talking about taming the tongue, because that's something that we all struggle with, and I think we as a society in general are doing a horrible job with. And so we'll get into that. But the very first part of this text, and we did the extended text from chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. And it talks about preachers. Let me read a couple of these words, our preachers and teachers in the church. It says, "My brothers and sisters, not many of you should become teachers because we know that we teachers will be judged more strictly." Wow.
Yeah.
That's sobering.
Yeah.
You ever, I mean, I'm sure you do. You think about that as you're preparing your sermons and delivering?
Oh, I mean, in seminary, you probably had the same kind of experience. My preaching professor said, there's two things you have to do in every sermon is talk about Jesus,
yeah.
to be Christ-focused,
yeah.
and then make sure 110% that you're always telling the truth.
Right.
Truth is what matters in the sermons. So
it does. It does, but it is sobering, and and thinking through, that, and there's reasons, good reasons why people that stand up and speak in church, whether it's from the podium in the sanctuary or whether it's from the podium in a Sunday school class or a small group, that those people that are teaching look at that as and hold on to it loosely as a gift that we have, this precious privilege that we have of bringing God's Word to people, because it's important. It affects people's lives, their faith lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, right. Yeah. It's just, there's no higher calling than that, to be able to stand up there each Sunday morning and do what we get the privilege to do.
Yeah. And so then it jumps in and starts talking about the tongue, which is something that applies to all of us, because most all of us speak. And a lot of us speak too much, and so we go back to a earlier verse in James. It's this whole thing about tongue and speaking and all of that is a repeated theme in James. But he talks about being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And so we do those things pretty poorly, but he gives an example. He has these three metaphors. They're all pretty easy to understand. The first one is a horse. You ride horses, Jerry?
I've never ridden a horse.
Never ridden a horse?
Never ridden a horse.
Your daughter's into horses?
No.
They will be. All little girls go through horses.
It's an expensive hobby.
Yeah. But, that to control a horse, to guide a horse, direct a horse, you put a bridle with a bit in the horse's mouth. And so if you can control the bit, you can control the whole horse. And so, that translates pretty easy for us if we can control ourselves. If we can control our speech, we can. And then the same thing with a ship with the rudder. It's also pretty small, and you can direct and guide the ship. And then he gets into talking about tongue as a fire.
Yeah.
And so
from hell.
From hell, yes. Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, how we know that the things that we say, the things that we post, that if it's not done the correct way, it can burn out of control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, what struck me, the first two examples, that they're kind of aside from the hell speak a little bit, because there are practical, everybody's a horse, a boat.
Right.
But as I was watching your sermon, I was thinking, wait a minute, you have to have experience and training to ride a horse. You're a jockey or you're a horseman. The same thing with a boat is you have to have a captain, have training and stuff, and therefore we need to train our tongue, kind of like the bridle or the rudder. We have to have training to.
That's an excellent point.
Control that thing. Those examples both have people that are trained to do that.
Right. Yeah. You just wouldn't, particularly you wouldn't get out on a storm with the boat if you didn't know what you were doing. You could you could turn the whole boat over.
Yeah, the rudder's no good unless somebody's training operating it.
That's 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a similar thing I think with fire too, because I actually did some volunteer firefighting when I was in college.
Really?
Yeah. This up in the mountains, and they would have fires, and so they would come to the college and recruit people, and they would actually use fire to fight fire. You've heard that before?
I've heard that in forest fires, yeah.
But you've got to know what you're doing with that, too, to have a controlled burn and that to go backwards. There's probably something that we could talk about with the way we speak when we're trying to control something that's out of control.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Are you pouring fuel on that? Or
Right, exactly, because sometimes we have to speak when there's been untruth and something's burned, but how we do that takes experience, just like to ride a horse or to drive a boat. You better know what you're doing if you're going to start a fire, another fire in a,
That's a great point.
Yeah. To get that. So, but one of the points that just kind of came together yesterday, because yesterday was Patriots Day, September 11th.
Right.
And so as I think back to today's September 12th, as recording this, people will be watching this on the 14th. But those first few days after September 11th, 2001, was a time where I think people, for whatever reason, their tongues were a little more under control as far as just civility, about unity, about coming together, about the encouragement of those that were having to be the first responders in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly was a time that we had, I remember, numerous prayer vigils the
right.
same day of,
right,
or the next day, and then the whole communities were together, and we were really one people, one nation, as we
were.
As we say.
We were united. And where were you on September 11th?
I was actually in a plane.
Oh my gosh!
I was when I went down. I was on a plane to Greensville, North Carolina. So I had no idea what was going on, so I landed and I
bet you Susan was scared to death.
Oh, she was blowing up the phone in my office.
Because I mean, like, planes are coming down.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And Greensboro is home of this large petroleum refinery, so they have all this big, huge tanks of petroleum.
Yeah.
And she, everybody's scared they're going to fly into that or something.
Right.
But,
yeah. Gosh, how scary was that?
So she laminated a ticket, and she does the kids every year. Here's where your daddy was. And
wow.
I think she may have been teaching school that day.
Mm-hmm.
So she was calling from the school trying to find out where the heck I was.
Yeah, I bet. but that's one thing. People can remember where they were September 11th. It's almost a defining memory of people. And I do think we remember. And it's not that we didn't have divisive talk before. I mean, as long as there's been politicians, there's been, like, you go back and look at, some of the early presidential races. They were pretty ugly. So that's always been there. But and so it certainly was a part of the political discourse at that time now. But it's just the way in which we have come so far from where we were in those first days, September 12th, 13th, 14th, those first days after 9/11, to say when we came through the pandemic and our country just became even more divided. Why do you think that is?
There's a lot of theories out there that social media is the devil, the virtual devil, I guess you'd call it. And I don't think it's helped. I don't know if it's hurt, but I don't think it's helped.
Oh, it's certainly. I don't think it's any one thing.
Yeah, I don't either. But I think people have more avenues for their voice now. Social media is one of them, but you have all kinds of other avenues for getting your voice out there. And somewhere along the line, we were told or taught that your voice matters. Which it does, and that you should express it loudly so everybody can hear it, no matter what the context is or who it is. And I think the second one may be a little bit erroneous, quite frankly.
Right. I mean, it's the whole thing. If you don't have anything nice to say, then maybe you probably shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
And so I think people have used that for the anger and frustration that maybe they felt through the pandemic, or maybe they feel with the economy, or with whatever politics may be in control, of the government at the time. It's a way of release.
Right.
And social media, because lots of times, even though your name's on it, it's a little bit more anonymous than, like, I wonder if you would say that if that person was sitting right there.
No, I would say no, they would.
You would temper your words somewhat.
I would hope you would.
I think so. But it's something that just continuously more and more divides us. And so, social media it definitely has not helped. And I don't think we can point to any one thing. It's much more complicated than that. But one thing is, it does come back to, I think, individual responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I think that it's so, you say, well, this person does this and they're so much worse than me. All I'm doing is venting, or talking to like-minded people or whatever. But, it kind of puts it out in the universe, and
you can't get it back.
You can't get it back. Mm-mm. Yeah, it's not. So
I mean, celebrities or politicians have been just burnt alive with words they said or something they posted 25 or 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So, I have to be careful with the words. So, as we try to, the title of the sermon is Practical Lessons, but one of the things that we do, Nick and I do here, is we try to break it down into some practical things. What would you say are some practical ways where we can tame our tongues? What are some ways in which we can be better at that?
I think the first verse that you taught, I think, was 119. Quick to listen. Mm-hmm. I teach chapel at our preschool every week, and last week I was going to teach something else, but a little boy was in timeout in chapel. Kid of my own heart there. He's over there in trouble because he wasn't listening. Mm-hmm. So I quickly pivoted. My whole lesson was about you have to listen before you speak, mm-hmm. before you do anything, because that gives your mind and your heart and your soul time to process what you just heard that you feel like you got to respond to right then. Mm-hmm. So you have to open your ears before you open your mouth.
Right. I think that's part of the division is just kind of the growing of the empathy of like being curious about why a person might have a particular stance that they might have or might act a particular way, mm-hmm. or giving people sort of giving them a pass because they're having a bad day and they might say something that you take offense to.
Yeah.
And just, and if it's somebody you know well, like lots of times and they snap or they say something out of character for them, yep. I will, but with strangers, sometimes we're not so gracious, and we can run into that.
Yep.
I have this sort of loose definition of sin. Sometimes when people ask me about sin, I mean, we point in the Bible to the 7 deadly sins and all of that, and that's true. But actions, activities, and attitudes that cause broken relationships.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So, and it could be within ourselves. We do something that causes brokenness within ourselves with an activity or mm-hmm. action we might take. More often than not, it would be with another person because we've been rude or we've been misjudged them or spoke without listening. Yeah. And also with God, the things that we do to break our relationship with God. I mean, God's always going to love us and be there for us, but we do things that make ourselves feel more distant. So just using that is sort of a loose definition. Mostly what we work on is these relationships that we have here on earth. Mm-hmm. These sort of horizontal relationships. So what practices can we put in place so that we can build bridges? And nurture community, I guess maybe the word. That the things that we can do that we can do better with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's understanding people too. That you had something in your sermon. I wrote it down. It was, what did you say? It was basically that everybody's going through something. What was the phrase you used? Everybody's
having a tough time, so be good to everybody.
Yeah. That was, I think, it was a quote somewhere. Yeah, so I think that's part of the realization of just interaction with anybody, right? Any relationship is that even the Lego song is everything is groovy, or you're in the movie.
Right.
It's not. Everything's not always groovy. I mean, people do go through times in their lives when they're having just a bad day.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be sensitive to that.
Are going through a bad time.
A bad time, yeah. It could be
like,
longer than
There's a story I read once, this guy is on like MARTA or someplace riding home, and he's got 2 kids there, and their kids are just out of control, and it's just irritating everybody that's on the train with him. And so finally somebody says to him, he says, "Hey, dude, you got to get control of your kids." And he goes, "Oh, gosh, I am so sorry. My mind is just a million miles away. We're just going home from the hospital. My wife just died, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do." And when people heard that, they immediately changed and became very empathetic. And, it's like, what can we do? Yeah. And I think that's the thing about, like, after 9/11, or say after Katrina, or after any kind of thing like that, people will show a level of humanity and empathy that we've sort of put these walls up, in our natural state here.
Yeah, and I think most of us, me included, we daily we live in a vacuum. It's all about me.
Right.
And then we only emerge when things like that happen that force us to emerge from our vacuum.
Yeah, I was very...
Or a sermon's preached on taming a tongue, and we emerge from our vacuum for 24 hours or more.
Yeah.
and then we go back in, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have short memories.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah, I preached a sermon yesterday, and the first thing that I said when I saw you, we ate at Chick-fil-A. It took me 15 minutes to drive from the church to the Chick-fil-A in Hickory Flat. The traffic is nuts. It's crazy. But that is such a first world problem.
Right, exactly, right?
It's just like, that is not the reason to let something like that ruin your day.
Exactly.
But we're all going through various levels of hard times, and some people are going through very difficult times, you know. And so just to give the people the grace there. What about like people that we run into that they just view the world differently than we do? You know, we might have as preachers. I was thinking about, you know, the Queen just died. That, you know, one of the things that she did very well, she's very neutral.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And I think it's what queens have to be. You know, she didn't take any political side. But like theological or political sides within the church as a pastor, sometimes we, you know, encounter people that are, you know, all over the place.
Yes.
And to nurture everybody and be a pastor to everybody. I mean, that's a tightrope.
Yeah, very much so, right?
But just for, you know, most normal people who aren't pastors, I mean, how do we deal? I mean, I know how I try to deal with people that have different political views or different theological views. What do you do? What's some tools you've...
I try to, I mean, I listen, first of all, like I said earlier, active listening, I think is what they call that. You try to listen and understand what they're really trying to say, because some people say some things, and on the surface it hears one way, but you just, if you really active listen, you're like, that's not what they're really trying to say.
Right.
Even political stuff.
Yeah.
So I try to attend to that person, first of all, and maybe not what they're saying necessarily, because I can hear, you know, between the lines, if you will.
Yeah.
And then trying to figure out discern. Yeah. And then, of course, we know our parishioners, so it's like, okay, what's really going on here, and meet them where they are. Obviously, don't try to correct them. If I think they're wrong, I would never tell them wrong anyway. Yeah. But I would never dive into the, like if it was a political comment or a theological comment for that matter, I would never unpack that with them to a point like, well, what is, you know, I think you're wrong. Let's go back and look at the Bible together. Yeah. I want to meet them where they are with that, and like, why are you saying that? And what was it in seminary? Was it a view from the balcony? You stand and see the room from up there instead of getting in the mix of it and getting caught up in that whatever's going on, that turmoil conversation, and try to read the room of that person and understand what's being said, really. Yeah. Well, you talked about preaching and that, you know, we need to talk about Jesus because... Yes, we do. That's how we have to... That's sort of central to what the Christian faith is. Right. But also to preach truth. Yes. But yet, within that, you know, we have to hold on to that, I think, tightly at the same time, also realizing that there people can look at a truth from a different perspective that we have. In fact, if we put the truth right here, you and I are going to be looking at it the same thing from the different way. We're going to see it from a different perspective. Right. And sometimes, lots of times, maybe all the time, I can learn something from hearing what your perspective might be on that. And it might be slightly different from me. And there may be a reason because of life experiences or stuff you've learned that's given you some insight that I would have never seen before because I'm not on your side of the table to look at it. Yeah, so. That's why I love interfaith dialogues, because even though they don't believe in Jesus, perhaps. Yeah. Whenever, I'm sure you experience too, whenever you're part of anything like that, you're like, I just learned something about my own religion I didn't even know. Yeah. You know, one of my best friends in Conyers was Muslim. And, you know, I was in a meeting one time and they were wanting me to do something, and I was going like, I don't know how I can do that because it was in the community, in a real interdenominational way. Yep. I do it all day in my church. Come to my church. Right. But, you know, when we can be, you know, me and Ahmed was his name, you know, we're brothers out here in the community, but you know, we go to our house of worship and stuff like that, and to be respectful of that within in that, you know. So anyway, we're coming up on... Man, that went by fast. It did go by fast. It went by fast. It was really fun. Quick, well, I look forward to doing it again next week. Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Exciting. Thanks for having me. So next week, let me give you a preview. Yes, please do. So we're going to be looking at, you know, what I've said about James is, and you know, compared to particularly Paul. And Paul, as a writer, was usually addressing something that was going on in that church, and he had definitely writing style of stuff. James jumps in with a bunch of what I would say wisdom sayings, or I'm calling them one-liners. There's a lot of those in James.
And so one of the ones that I refer to each week, because it's one that we've all heard, whether we've read James or not, is, be doers of the word and not hearers only.
Yep.
And so we're going to be going into that. And Dad, one thing, and we'd love to hear your perspective next week as we get into it, is that sometimes seems diametrically opposed to what Paul says, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And as Wesleyan Christians, United Methodists, we kind of approach things through grace. That seems a lot like work salvation.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what James is saying necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
But people have interpreted it as that. So
you got Martha and Mary too. One is working and one is listening.
That's right. Oh wow, there you go.
Yeah, see where I'm at.
Yeah. But anyway, that'll be fun to unpack next week. And that's Hickory Flat, folks, that's what we're going to be looking at in the sermon this week. I hope you have a great rest of the week. You can always contact us if you've got questions. If Jared or I said something you didn't quite understand or would like to hear more about, it's Hickory Flat at, it's deep dive at hickoryflat.org or .church. Either one works. Send us an email. We look at those, and we'll try to reply if we can. And Jared, thank you so much for being here. This has been fun, and look forward to doing it some more.
Me too.
So God bless you, and God bless you all. Bye-bye now.